Welcome everybody. My name is Dan Moore, and today I'll go through a high-level overview of the year-end close for Dynamics GP. So today we'll have three parts. Part one, I'll just go over the new features that have been released this year so far. Part two, we'll go over preparing for the year-end close, the order you want to close, the different modules in, and the procedures in each of those modules. We'll go over the 1099 processing, and then a section for Q&A. And then part three will be mainly for a payroll client. So if you're not on GP payroll, you can feel free to jump off at that time. So the 2025 US year-end payroll update has been released. It's going to be GP version 18.8.1919. And like with all their year-end updates, it's inclusive of all their previous updates for the year. So it'll include 18.7, 0.6, etc. And if you'd like to get this update installed and you need our help, just feel free to email gpsupport@intelitechsolutions.com and we can get that scheduled for you. So for part one, what's new in GP so far this year? So on the 18.8 release in October 2025, we got the new sales order processing required field message. Just a simple message update, and I can show you here in my GP. Let me bring up a sales transaction to show you how this works. It's an adjustment here for when a required field is missing on a sales transaction. You try to save. Before, this message would just say not all required fields have been entered. They've just added the additional text here to tell you to expand the scrolling window to view additional required fields. And that scrolling window is just this show details double down arrow, and you can see the bold type required fields here, so you can select it. So it just helps you find that required field a little easier, just a little better messaging. So also on the 18.8 release in October, there's a change to the vendor class roll down in the payables setup. Previously, when you updated a vendor class in the setup, the system would ask if you wanted to roll that change down to all vendors assigned to that class, and the yes checkbox used to be marked by default, which often led to unintended updates across many vendors, especially with customers that had large vendor lists. Now that prompt defaults to no, so there's no risk of accidentally mass updating vendors. And then there was also a change in the October 18.8 release for luxury auto depreciation display and edit. This used to be something that every year the IRS updates the limits for these luxury vehicles, and in the past, keeping up with it meant installing annual updates. Now in GP 18.8, they introduced a dedicated window where you can manually enter these values and it'll store them for you year by year. So it gives you the ability to view, manage, and edit depreciation limits yourself without waiting for system updates. And you can find those limits by visiting the IRS website. I think I put the accurate ones in here for 2025. So in the 18.8 release in October, there was the long-awaited feature of the sales order batches navigation list. This gives you instant access to your sales order batches. No more digging through menus or reports. Users can filter large sets of data in one place, making it easier to spot trends or issues. And you can take actions like posting or editing, printing directly from the list. And I'll show you that here because this is pretty nifty. It's basically if I come on the sales, under your sales navigation pane here, there will be a sales order batches list now here. This is kind of a neat feature. It's basically a series post for sales that has filtering options on it and a transaction view. So here's all of my sales batches. I could add a filter just saying, you know, I don't want any $0 batches. So I could say is greater than, or it's not empty, greater than excludes. You can put like who it's approved by, approved user, all these different filters you can add to kind of filter through it. You can still select all your batches and post multiple batches at once. Or if you select one, you can still edit it to go back to the batch entry window that you normally would see. A handy feature too is there's a go-to here, so you can select a batch, click the go-to and view transactions, and it has a nice transaction view of the transactions in the batch. So yeah, it's kind of like a series post with filters added to it. So it's pretty neat for sales instead of having to go through the batch entry window. Okay, so for part two, we're just going to go over preparing for the year-end close in all the modules and the order that you want to close those modules in and the procedures to close them. We'll also talk about the 1099 processing and then have a section for Q&A. So there's no year-end changes this year for inventory, payables, receivables, general ledger, or analytical accounting. So kind of a light year. Here are some helpful KB articles that have step-by-step instructions to close each module. If you have trouble downloading these ever, or you want these sent to you, just please reach out to us and we can send you these KB articles. So for the year-end close, we want to check a few things to prepare first. We want to check the master postings. Let me bring that up here so you can see it. So that is under your administration navigation pane. And under routines, you'll see this master posting option here. I want to come in here and make sure that everything is posted and that any unused batches that you might have, you'd probably want to delete those too. Next, we want to check setups. Check your general ledger setup. Make sure you're keeping history, as your retained earnings account set up, etc. Check the setups and in all your modules just to make sure everything is there and set up correctly the way you want. And then thirdly, monthly maintenance, like check links and reconcile. You can test these in a test company. We could refresh a current production backup to a test company so you could test how long these maintenance procedures take. Inventory reconcile, for example, can take hours for some customers and can only be done after hours on a Friday when all users are out of the system. And then, of course, we recommend taking backups before and after closing. So let's look at the inventory year-end close first and what does it do. So when you close the inventory year-end, the summary year-to-date quantities, costs, and sales information are moved to the last year's summary figures. The beginning quantity of each item is updated to be the on-hand quantity at each site. And some of the reports, such as the turnover report, use that beginning quantity field in calculations. The quantity sold for each item is reset to 0. And then there are some options on the year-end close window to remove discontinued items, sold receipts, and lot attributes, and update item standard cost. So let's go over the procedures for inventory year-end close. Firstly, we want to post all sales, invoices, and returns for the current year. Post all purchasing, receivings, and returns for the current year. And post all inventory adjustments and transfers for the current year. So basically any transactions that touch or move inventory, we want to make sure those are posted for the current year. Once everything's posted, take a backup before running the next step. And that next step would be to run inventory reconcile utility. Reconcile will tidy up quantities and make sure they tie out to the transaction detail. If you haven't ever done this utility before, I would recommend doing a test run in a test company refreshed from production to assess time. This is a process that can take hours, like I said, for some customers. Usually have to do it on a Friday at the end of the day, and it requires all users to be out of the system. And you can always call us for help with that process too if you need it. Once your reconcile is done, complete your physical counts and post variances. You can call us for help if you need to get started on a stock count. Print your pre-year-end close reports just so you have something to look back and compare if something doesn't look right after closing. We recommend the purchase receipts and stock status reports. I could show you where those are real quick here under your inventory pane and reports. There's an activity section here, and you got your purchase receipts and stock status reports here that can give you some more detail on your inventory. Once reports are printed, it's time to perform the year-end close. And then once the year-end close is done, you want to close the fiscal periods for inventory. And I'll just show you where the fiscal periods are as well. Those are under administration, setup, under your company section and fiscal periods. You just come in here and close the fiscal periods for inventory once the year-end is done with it. So in the inventory year-end close window, we have some options we mentioned earlier. There's an option to remove discontinued items, which will remove discontinued items with 0 quantities, and it'll also remove all transaction history for those items. There are some reports that will print discontinued item information. If a discontinued item is part of a kit or a component of a bill of materials or is a bill of materials, it won't be removed. We can remove sold lot attributes, which will remove those lot attributes of items that are tracked by lot numbers and that have been completely sold. And we can remove sold receipts and cost change history, which will remove receipts that have been completely sold. If you choose to remove sold receipts, you also have to enter a cutoff date prior to. And then we can update items standard cost, which will update the item's standard cost with the current cost or the last purchased cost for any items that are using standard cost. And here's just a screenshot of that window in inventory. It's under your inventory and your routine section, and it's the year-end close option. You can see those options for discontinued, sold lot attributes, and to update the item standard cost. The inventory year-end close also, just as a note, does not print any report. So once you process it, there's no report or anything that prints. So I'm covering receivables and payables together because their procedures are very similar. Both payables and receivables are not required to be closed since they're both date-sensitive modules. But if you do want to close them, recommend closing the fiscal close should be done at the end of the company's fiscal year before posting any transactions in the new fiscal year, and the calendar close should be done at the end of the calendar year, so December 31st, before posting any transactions in the new calendar year. And then you can always enter and save transactions for the new year in a batch to avoid a bottleneck. And note that even if you cannot close the fiscal and calendar years on those correct dates, we have scripts we can use to correct those date buckets for you. You can also, like I said, enter and save transactions in a batch if possible. So receivables and payables year-end close and what it does. So if you don't close the receivables and payables year, it skews the summary view for the amount since last close view. I can show you where that's at here. So the payables close affects the, if we come under the cards summary in purchasing here, and we pick up a vendor and we click this yearly button. In this window here, you can see there's a summary view, amount since last closed. So since we only have year to date, last year, and life to date, you can see where if you haven't closed payables for a couple years, this year to date field would probably be pretty inaccurate. But you can always use the other views in here, which will be accurate. So you click those views and click calculate, and then it shows the dollar amounts. So really skipping the close on these modules really affects this view. And if you don't use this view, then it doesn't pertain to you much. So the calendar close and what it does, it clears the 1099 amounts and moves them to the last year column in the calendar view. So back here in that view here, so under the calendar view, the calendar close moves the 1099 amounts to last year, and the fiscal close will move all the other amounts into the last year in the fiscal year view. Let's go over the procedures for receivables and payables for year end. So first we want to enter and post all AR and AP transactions for the current year. Just a note again, if possible, you can save and not post any transactions for the new year. Complete any sales and payables month-end procedures. So examples of that would be like aging customer accounts, removing paid transactions, reconciling the subledger to the GL, etc. And then perform your year-end close for fiscal and calendar years. 1099s we'll discuss later, but they are also date sensitive, so they can really be processed at any time. And then once you're done closing everything, we would close the fiscal periods for sales and purchasing as well. It's just a screenshot of the receivables and payables year-end close windows and how identical they are. Procedures are basically exactly the same. So 1099 requirements. If you have more than 10 1099s, you're required by law to file them electronically. You can use a third party like Green Shades that can do it for you. Or you can email us at GP Sport and Teltech Solutions if you'd like more information on that. We recommend being proactive and collecting those employer identification numbers now. You can use the letter writing feature to produce letters to vendors if you don't have like a blast email out there already, but under your reports here, there's a letter writing assistant here that you can set up letters and send them to all your vendors. So it's kind of a nifty feature you can send out if your vendors have email addresses set up on them. It's 1099s. There's no form changes this year. And just a note, you can print all the 1099 forms now with the lines, so there's no need to buy the pre-printed 1099 forms any longer. This was included in the 18.6 release and will be in this year-end update. Also now when you create a 1099 miscellaneous vendor, it defaults the 1099 box to 3 now. 1096 form changes, there were none this year. They just updated the year on the form. So that's it there. So let's go over 1099 processing. So the 1099 amounts are updated when invoices and payments are posted if a vendor is set as a 1099 vendor. If a vendor is set to a 1099 vendor mid-year, it can cause the 1099 amounts to be understated. And let me show you here, I'll bring up GP. I'm going to show you these 1099 editing tools that we have to correct that if that ends up happening. So we have the edit transaction, 1099 transaction information. Under your purchasing transactions here, there's an edit 1099 transaction information. So we can bring up a vendor. Maybe it's a vendor that was set to a 1099 mid-year, so half their transactions were 1099, half were not. You could come in here, find out what the transaction, how much it was for, and update this to be the 1099 amount and then process. It'll update the transaction. The other area we can do this in is the 1099 details window under your cards. 1099 details. We can bring up a vendor ID here. And by month, we can manually edit amounts that you have in here. If you put it by year, you can't edit it. You have to put it by month. And then you could come in here and edit transaction or the actual summary amounts for the month. And then the last place is under your purchasing utilities. There's an update 1099 information. So you would use this update 1099 information utility to modify the tax type or 1099 statement box numbers for a range of vendors, the transactions or both. So up here you can do their transactions or both the vendor and their transactions. So in addition to modifying the tax type from one type to another. You can also change the type from a non-1099 vendor to a 1099 vendor or vice versa. So this is helpful when you add a new vendor record, but maybe the vendor didn't provide their tax identification number until later in the year. So this way you can change the vendor record and the transactions that have already been entered for them to 1099. So once you have all of your vendors set correctly, we then would want to install the year-end update and print 1099s. You can call us if you need help installing the year-end update. You can now process 1099s after the year-end close and even after you've processed checks in the new year because they're date sensitive. And there's no state magnetic media available. There's a third party that can do that, so let us know if you need help with that. So before printing the actual 1099s, you want to validate the 1099 amounts by printing an edit list to see what amounts will print on the 1099s. Under routines and purchasing your print 1099s window, there's two print buttons. There's a print forms, which prints the actual 1099s, and then there's the second print button here. And this will print like your edit list of vendors. So you can print that edit list to see what it would print on the 1099s. So after validating the 1099 amounts, make any adjustments you need using those 1099 edit tools we talked about. Then install the year-end update and finally print your 1099s. So the 1099 IRS requirements are to produce a 1099 for every 1099 vendor with transactions during the year. If you have more than 10 1099s, you're required by law to file electronically. Again, you can use a third party like Green Shades to do that. Intelitech can also help get the 1099 information out in a format needed to upload to the IRS. So you can reach out to us if you need that too. Recommend being proactive and collecting those employer identification numbers now. Like I said, you can use that letter writing feature and check with the IRS for deadlines. So for fixed assets, there was a change this year to the luxury auto maximum depreciation deduction amounts. So the maximum depreciation deduction amounts allowed for luxury vehicles has been updated for assets placed in service in calendar year 2025 to comply with IRS guidelines. You can use that new feature we discussed earlier, that window now that you can manually update the luxury vehicle amounts if you want yourself now. And I believe I put the current amounts out on this slide here for you, but you can find them on the RP 2516 document on the IRS website if you need to, or you can just contact us if you want this info. So the fixed assets year-end close and timing, you want to ensure that all payables transactions have been entered and posted for the year. This guarantees that all outstanding fixed assets transactions are capitalized. Complete additions, retirements, and depreciations for the year. Confirm your calendar and quarterly setups are correct. So that's under fixed assets setup calendar. So if I go into GP here, under the financial tab, under your setup, fixed assets, calendar, here's where you could set up your calendars, and your quarters button here is where you would set up your quarters. So make sure those are set up. And then just a note that you can't process any new year transactions and fixed assets until the year-end close is completed. Once you've completed setting up the new calendar and quarters, you want to check the fixed assets GL posting window and just make sure everything's posted in here too. So that's under your routines, find out your financial pane here and your routines section and GL posting. So you just want to make sure everything in here is posted. I would not put in any restrictions just to make sure that you're picking up everything that might be out here for it. So what does the fixed asset closing actually do? So on the fixed asset general card, the quantity is copied to the begin quantity. So let's say you had 5 of these assets and retired 2 of them, the begin quantity would be 3. So we can see here under this expansion, there's the begin quantity. So that will get updated. The year-to-date maintenance is reset to 0. That's off of this last maintenance expansion. So this year-to-date maintenance here gets reset to 0. Then on the asset book, the year-to-date depreciation amount right here is reset to 0. The cost basis is copied to the begin reserve field. So if we go under this expansion, it gets copied to this begin reserve field. And the salvage is copied to the begin salvage. So the salvage amount, if you had any, will get copied to the begin salvage field. And then the other thing that the close does is in the book setup, under your setup here in fixed assets, the current fiscal year gets updated to the new year for all books. So to go over these procedures again, we want to enter and post all fixed asset transactions for the current year. It's very important to depreciate all assets through the last day of the current fiscal assets fiscal year to ensure depreciation amounts are correct. As a reminder, in Microsoft Dynamics GP 2015 and later, the fixed asset year-end closing report was added to the year-end close process. So that optional report will print per book, and it shows the asset ID, the description, cost basis, year-to-date depreciation, etc., for all assets impacted by the year-end close process. So in a single step, you can close the year-end, print a status report for all the assets that were affected, and you can save it. So then complete the GL posting process that we went over, and then produce and review the year-end reports. At that point, we recommend making another backup once you have all your depreciations done and pre-year-end reports printed. A new report is generated during the fixed assets year-end close routine, as we mentioned. And it's just a screenshot of this window. So that's under your year-end close here, under routines, under financial routines, fixed assets section, year-end. And here's all of your books. So you can move them all over and then select continue, and that will close the year out. Just a screenshot of that window again. Project accounting does not have a required year-end close for the fiscal or calendar year, and projects can span multiple fiscal periods, and projects are independent of the fiscal year-end and calendar year-end. So the closing steps for project accounting is to post and close, post all cost transactions, run the final billings and revenue recognition on projects for the year, ensure that the general ledger module is updated before you run the year-end routine on the general ledger module. After you do this, project accounting and general ledger will reconcile more quickly and easily, and then update your rate tables in the project accounting position rate table maintenance and project accounting employee rate table maintenance windows. So that's under your cards here, under your project navigation pane, and under cards, here's your position rate table and your employee rate table under your cards section here. Okay, so the general ledger closing is pretty flexible. You would want to do this after all other modules have been closed and reconciled, and this is what brings over the beginning balances on your financials. This can be done sooner or later. The sooner you do it, the sooner you can post to 2025 as a historical year. If you have to do it later, you can't close the GL at the end of the year for whatever reason, you can modify your balance sheet reports to include that ending balance from the prior year. So what does the general ledger close do? It closes all your profit and loss account balances into your retained earnings account. The balance sheet account balances are rolled forward into the new year by having a balance brought forward entries created. All your open general ledger records are moved to the historical table, and the year that was just closed is marked as historical. And if installed and activated, the analytical accounting module is also automatically closed with the GL. So some procedures here for closing the general ledger. You want to complete the closing procedures for all other modules, then make a backup. If you need our help with that, please feel free to call. You want to confirm your account types, PL versus balance sheet. Pretty important. I think that's one of the biggest support issues that we get for year end is an account wasn't set up correctly for year end. So I recommend just in GP here running your basic smart list under financial accounts. Your basic smart list account smart list will show the posting type, so you can verify beforehand that your posting types on all of your accounts are correct. So I'd recommend doing that. I'd recommend looking at your GL setup. So under financial setup, general ledger, make sure everything is set up here. Is your retained earnings account set up? Is it the correct account? Make sure you maintain history on your account transactions are marked. Make sure posting to history is marked if you want to be able to post entries to 2025 after it's closed. And then finally, print and review a final, detailed, and summary trial balances and financials, and just save those to like a year-end document folder, just for pre-year-end close reports. At that point, once you got your pre-year-end reports printed, we recommend closing the fiscal periods, create the new fiscal and calendar year, and that's all done back. If I open up GP again under your administration pane here and set up company fiscal periods. So we come in here and close out the fiscal periods, and then make sure you set up your new year. So you could go to 2026, put in your first date, last date, number of periods, and calculate, and that will calculate all your new year. And then reconcile the year to close. So under financial utilities, reconcile. I go back to financial here, utilities, and reconcile. You can reconcile the year you're closing. So when the year-end close routine is complete, the year-end closing report is printed. The report lists the accounts that were closed and the transactions that were created to close those accounts. Year-end closing report is part of the audit trail, so save this report for the company's permanent records. And the year-end closing report cannot be reprinted. It's also a good time to make sure that you have enough space on your SQL database server, as some of the GL tables, for example, like the GL 30,000 will increase in size. And you have to have all users log out when you do the close. And it'll prompt you for that when you try to close it if there's users in the system. Then if you run into a problem, you can always use the reverse historical year closing. I'll show you that too here. So under the financial routines year and close, if you close the year and it goes through fine, but you need to undo it for whatever reason, there's a reverse historical year button here. So you only want to use this when the year-end close actually goes through. If there's some sort of interruption though, and the year-end close didn't complete, then you don't want to use this. In that case, you'd want to restore from a backup. So general ledger, some housekeeping and updates. You want to adjust the budget figures for the new year and then print the financial statements. You want to print the profit and loss statement just to verify that the profit and loss accounts were closed to the retained earnings account. After closing, you can print the balance sheet to verify that the balance sheet accounts indicate that the balances were brought forward. And then for unit accounts, if you need to clear unit accounts during the year end, you have to make sure that the unit accounts are marked beforehand. So if I come into GP here and under cards, unit account, if I select a unit account, there's a clear balance during year end close checkbox. You just want to make sure that that's marked, and then it will close on year end. So the final step is to close the fiscal periods for all modules in GL. We saw that here in the administration company fiscal periods, close all the fiscal periods. And then once your 2025 year is marked as history, you can still post transactions to it. Remember, so long as you have that posting to history marked in your general ledger setup. And if you have to post an entry to a closed year, it'll automatically make a second entry and updates that beginning balances for the new year as well. So it does that for you. So going over the general ledger routines for year-end closing, here's a screenshot of the year-end close window. It has some options in here to maintain inactive accounts, review the year-end closing report, check the status in the year-end close window. It does have a status bar there now that you can see when it's done. And then run the summary trial balance to confirm that year-end was closed and all the accounts were updated correctly. Analytical accounting, it's automatically closed when you close the GL, but we do have scripts that we can run to check the analytical accounting against the GL and make sure like the data is correct there. And just to note that if you're doing a year-end close and you do have analytical accounting, you want to do it on a machine that has analytical accounting installed on it. Otherwise, it won't bring those balances forward for analytical accounting. So part 3 is for payroll. If you don't have payroll, you can feel free to drop off at this point. There are 2 different payroll updates. One is a year-end update, which is code. The other is a payroll tax update, which is just a tax rate update. Then there's usually ACA, but there's no changes this year for that. And then there's a new payroll overtime premium tracking that we need to go over. So what's new in payroll this year? There have been no changes to the W-2, W-3, W-4, or electronic W-2 filing changes. So again, this update's inclusive of all previous updates. So it'll have 18.7, 6, 5, 4, etc. So the payroll year-end close creates the year-end wage file that contains the annual wage information used to generate W-2s, W-3s, 1099s, electronic W-2s, and 1095Cs, 94Cs for the year being closed. We recommend making a backup before closing payroll for sure. All current pay runs for the year should be completed before closing. And you want to close before processing any pay runs in the new year. So the steps to close is to complete the current year payroll processing, verify W-2 and 1099-R information, print the W-2 and W-3 transmittal form, print your 1099-R and 1096 transmittal form, create the magnetic media file if required, archive any inactive employees, set up fiscal periods for the next year, and then close the fiscal period for the payroll module. Once you've closed the fiscal period, we recommend making a backup, then confirm that the latest 2025 year-end update has been installed on all GP workstations. Complete all the pay runs for the current year. Once you're done with all pay runs for the current year, create another backup. Create the year-end wage file by processing the payroll year-end closing, and then create another backup. So there's also the payroll tax update, and Microsoft is scheduled to release that round 1 mid-December sometime here soon. You do not want to install this tax update until all pay runs for 2025 year are completed and the wage file is generated. If you accidentally install that rate table before you're done, any payrolls that you've installed that on will be inaccurate, so will your wage file, since they'll be going off the new rates. And then round 2 is going to be sometime in mid-January. And then since this is a tax table update only, there's no code changes. It doesn't need to be done on each workstation. It could just be loaded on one workstation that'll update for everybody. So for the Affordable Care Act, there The forms are not due until March. The 1095-C must be provided to employees by March 2nd, 2026. 1094-C and 1095-C must be filed with the IRS by March 31st of 2026 if filing electronically. And there are no changes for ACA or the 1095-C form. So the Affordable Care Act, Microsoft Dynamics GP does not support electronic filing for the 2025 year for ACA. Third-party products are available to purchase, such as green shades and integrity data that will allow you to track ACA in Microsoft Dynamics GP and can do the electronic filing for you. You can email gpsupport@intelitechsolutions.com with any ACA questions. So the overtime premium tracking. So there are no changes in the Dynamics GP 2025 year-end update specifically around overtime or tips tracking. For 2025, you have flexibility. The overtime premium can be reported in box 14 on the W-2 or communicated through a separate letter to employees. We can implement a smart list for you that helps compile overtime premium if needed. Just email GP support Intelitech Solutions and we can help you with that. We have a link here to the IRS website on this information as well that we can send if you need. For 2026, the reporting of the overtime premium on the W-2 will be mandatory. The IRS has released a draft of the 2026 W-2 form that includes a new box 12 code TT for reporting qualified overtime premiums. And then Intelitech will reach out and advise on this setup with our payroll clients. And that's really all I had today for the year-end close for 2025. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. If you do have any additional questions, please call us at 302-656-7050, or you can email us at gpsupport@intelitechsolutions.com. We appreciate you joining our session today, and we hope to see you guys again on our next webinar.